This drawing took me 12 hours. This one took me 4 and it looks more real by just fixing one mistake. This is also how my students have gone from this to this and this to this. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to avoid making the exact same mistake so you never waste hours on a drawing that looks flat and lifeless. Most artists struggle to capture real likeness because their portraits end up looking a bit washed out. This happens because they're either intimidated to go darker or they just don't know how to read their tones. So instead, they pile on detail hoping that that will fix their portrait. But all that does is just make a washed out portrait more detailed. I know this because I did the exact same thing for years. The moment I stopped obsessing over detail and focused on values, my portrait got more realistic and took half the time. Values are the tonal shades that run from white all the way to black. And the reason it makes such a big difference comes down to one thing. If I show you these, you immediately know who it is, regardless if it's blurry, pixelated, or from a distance. That's because your brain reads the values as they create the structure of the face. So then, why is focusing on the details and glossing over the values such a common mistake? Well, when you look at a portrait, you are faced with an overwhelming amount of values, and most artists have no idea where to start or even know how to read them. Here's where it gets insane. Let me show you something that will genuinely blow your mind. If you haven't seen this, trust me, which value is darker? Is it A or B? It's obvious, right? It's A. It's clearly A. There's no way that it's not A. But watch what happens when I connect them. They're exactly the same. And even when you know this and you're seeing it, your brain still refuses to believe it. This happens because values aren't absolute. They're relative. A looks darker because everything around it is lighter, and B looks lighter because everything around it is darker. This is exactly why beginners draw the whites of the eyes as pure white, because everything surrounding it is darker, so they appear white, when in reality they're usually just a light or a midtone. So it's no surprise values feel so confusing. Your brain literally lies to you every time you draw. But what if there was a way to make them much simpler to understand? Well, let me show you. Instead of trying to draw every tone that you can see, simplify them into just 5. With 5, you still cover that entire range from the lightest lights to the darkest darks, but now there are far fewer decisions to make. And here's the key. You don't actually lose any of the realism either, you just lose the confusion. To prove this, here are some of my drawings just using 5 values. Now you might be wondering, well, how do you know which value belongs where? Well, to make this much simpler, you can use my free portrait tool that tells you exactly where each value goes with just one click of a button. That means that likeness and depth shows up earlier. Okay, so now you know what values are and how to simplify them. Let me show you exactly how to use them. Because if you get this stage right, not only will your portraits look more realistic, but you'll stop fighting the drawing the entire time. Have you ever started a portrait that looked good in the beginning and then halfway through it slowly got worse, and then by the end you're not really drawing anymore, you're just fixing mistakes? Most artists don't realize how you start a portrait directly impacts how the rest of the drawing goes. So they jump straight into the pupils, the eyelashes and the tiny details, and then spend hours later in the drawing trying to fix the portrait. But here's the kicker. All of that can actually be avoided by how you start the first hour of the drawing. It's the same reason why builders make sure the base and the structure are solid first before even touching a single brick, because otherwise the house will just fall apart. Portraits work in the exact same way. If you spend the first hour on your foundation, then everything afterwards becomes 10 times easier. And here's the thing. Your foundation is actually the simplest version of the portrait. It literally strips away everything that doesn't actually add to the likeness. So you're left with only the parts that matter, the core lights and the core shadows. This means that you can literally draw 20% of the portrait and lock in your likeness, which means everything afterwards becomes refinement, not repairing. Now, the easiest way to draw your foundation is to focus on the first 2 to 3 tones on the 5 value scale. This means any corrections that need to be made afterwards are much easier. And if you're unsure what to look for in your foundation, you can use my free portrait tool because it tells you exactly what to aim for in those beginning stages. Now here's where it gets interesting. Once your foundation is locked in, you have complete freedom with where you want to take the portrait because the likeness is already solved. You can go for a more realistic look like I do and add the remaining values and then saturate the midtones. Or you can do something different like John Sargent, where he leaves huge areas of the face with basically just the paper showing. There's no midtones at all, just carefully placed dark tones anchoring those light areas. And even without a dark background, he still darkens the surrounding areas of the face, giving those light values something to work against. Two completely different results, but the foundation and the relationships between the lights and darks are the same. That's the freedom you get when likeness is solved early. Now, here's something that most artists don't realize. Not every value contributes equally to a portrait. There's actually a hierarchy. The values at either end of the tonal scale do most of the heavy lifting. The midtones are literally just there to support them. To prove this, watch what happens when I increase the exposure on this portrait. The light and the midtones disappear first. The darks hold the portrait together. That's how contrast works. You also notice the edges start to disappear. But watch what happens when you draw them back in. The portrait still reads. That's exactly what Sargent does. That's the power of knowing which values matter most. So if your portrait is looking washed out, don't think you just have to darken everything, because where you place those darker values completely changes how the portrait reads. If I add darker values specifically on the features and the front, your eye goes straight there. But if I only darken the side of the head, it feels unbalanced because now your eye is being pulled to a less important part of the portrait. So what does this mean for you? Well, when you have a portrait that is too light, don't just start cramming detail in. Ask yourself, where do you want the viewer to look, and place your darker tones there. Get that right and the whole portrait becomes really pleasing to look at. But here's the issue. None of this really matters if you don't know how to begin a portrait. So watch this video here so you know exactly what to do first and never waste hours drawing a portrait in the wrong direction.